Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're not just looking at crime. We are really dissecting two calculated acts of terror that fundamentally altered the fabric of American society and, in many ways, reshaped modern law enforcement.
It's a fascinating contrast. We're plunging into a stack of sources that looks at two infamous criminal campaigns separated by half a century, but, they're bound by this calculated rationale behind the violence.
Exactly. It's organized, cold-blooded violence versus this isolated ideological terror.
Right. On one hand, you have the St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929, a professional hit, really, for market dominance. Violence is a rational tool for securing the trade of liquid gold, which was alcohol during Prohibition.
And on the other, the 17-year ghost war waged by the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. Here, violence was a rational tool for ideological revolution against the technological system itself.
Our mission today is to go beyond the sensational headlines, the basic chronologies. We want to understand the societal why, and most importantly, these so whats.
The so what? The enduring legal, political, and philosophical consequences of these two American nightmares.
Yeah.
So, let's unpack this contrast. We'll start in 1929 Chicago, when organizational brutality was at its absolute peak. To understand the massacre, you really have to understand the enormous stakes. It's 1929, smack in the middle of Prohibition,
Right.
and our sources describe Chicago not just as cold, but as a city fueled by a black market that had turned beer and spirits into genuine liquid gold.
Absolutely. Prohibition didn't eliminate drinking. Not at all. It simply rerouted, I think the figure is something like $3 billion of revenue, directly into the hands of organized crime.
$3 billion.
The stakes were astronomical,
Yeah.
and the competition was, well, it was existential. The primary war in Chicago was between Al Capone's Southside Italian organization and George Bugs Moran's North Side Irish mob.
And Moran wasn't some small-time player. His gang was notoriously independent, controlling these really valuable, wealthy districts of the North Side. This wasn't just competition. The sources are clear. This was an active, prolonged, and just brutally escalating war. They weren't just stepping on toes. They were systematically eliminating each other's assets and their people.
And the violence preceding Valentine's Day was not random at all. It had become deeply, viciously personal.
Right.
The immediate trigger, according to investigators, was a series of direct challenges to Capone's power structure. Moran's men had recently made an attempt on the life of Capone's top enforcer, Jack McGurn.
Machine Gun Jack.
That's the one. He was instrumental in planning the eventual massacre. But the truly unforgivable sin, in the eyes of the organization,
Was the murder of Capone's mentor, Pasqualino Lordo?
exactly. In the world of the mob, killing a mentor is a profound, almost sacred violation of respect. Capone had to respond with something overwhelming,
A message.
an undeniable message sent across the entire criminal underworld. Moran had to be erased.
So how do they set the trap?
Well, the trap they set for Moran was brilliant in its simplicity, really, because it exploited the single biggest motivator of the era:
Profit.
profit margins. It had to be irresistible. The bait was a specific tip, likely planted by a Capone operative, claiming a massive, cheap truckload of hijacked old log cabin whiskey had just been smuggled in from Detroit.
This was the big score.
The promised payoff. The meeting was set for 10:30 a.m. on February 14th at the SMC Cartage Company, Garage Moran's own North Side distribution hub.
It's the promise of unprecedented supply at an unbeatable price. I mean, who could possibly resist that? Hashtag be the victims and the fatal miscalculation.
And what's fascinating here is the combination of individuals who showed up.
Yeah.
It really highlights the hybrid nature of a modern criminal organization. It wasn't just gunmen.
No, it was business infrastructure mixed with muscle.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Let's detail the 7 men who gathered, because the sources clearly delineate their roles. You had the primary muscle, the Gusenberg brothers, Frank and Pete.
Moran's most lethal enforcers, deadly efficient with Thompson guns.
Then there was Albert Kachalik, or James Clark. He was Moran's second in command, basically the operational manager.
Right. And then you move into the corporate side of the criminal enterprise. Adam Heyer, the accountant.
An accountant at a mob hit.
Well, he had to be there. Any massive, cheap shipment of whiskey required immediate auditing and allocation. Then there was Albert Weinshank, who owned a speakeasy and a cleaning business.
The front operator.
A crucial front operator. He was there to manage the liquor's distribution path into the North Side market.
And then you have the heartbreaking outsiders who were just, caught up in the mechanism. John May, the mechanic.
Yeah, he's described as an ex-convict who was actively trying to stay on the straight and narrow by fixing trucks for the cartage company. He was essentially just an employee showing up for work.
And the strangest one of all, Reinhard Schwimmer, the optometrist.
This detail is so peculiar. He was a wannabe, a civilian who just loved the proximity to danger, the underworld thrill. He was often hanging around the garage hoping for excitement or just a chance to feel important.
Now for the twist of fate. George Bugs Moran, the main target, along with his lieutenant Willie Marks and driver Ted Newberry, they were running late.
About 10 minutes late. As they approached the garage, Newberry spotted a black Cadillac pulling up.
Not just any Cadillac.
No, it was outfitted with a siren and a gong bell. It was unmistakably, if falsely, a police car.
And this is the critical juncture. Moran doesn't panic. He doesn't suspect a rival gang.
No, because police raids, a pinch as they called it, were completely routine. It meant a brief arrest, a few hours in jail, and a negotiated bribe.
So he just assumes it's corrupt cops on a
A
shakedown?
routine shakedown. So Moran and his top men, they simply turn around and walk away. They head to a local diner, deciding to wait for the police to take their bribe and clear out.
And that single assumption
Yeah.
that the system was fundamentally corruptible saved his life.
Meanwhile, the 7 men inside made the exact same fatal assumption.
They see the uniforms, the detectives entering the garage. No one draws a weapon.
Not a single one. They assume they're being detained for a bribe. And following protocol, they line up against the north wall, hands raised. They literally cooperated with their executioners, believing they were just, negotiating an expense. Hashtag C, the provision of the execution.
The planning, the methodology, the sheer audacity of this crime is what elevated it from just another gangland killing to a true massacre that horrified the nation.
The disguise was the centerpiece. 4 men entered. 2 dressed in authentic-looking police uniforms and 2 in civilian clothes, mimicking plainclothes detectives.
And the brilliance of that was the psychological effect. To any observer on the street, this looked like a legitimate, high-profile police raid.
The police are cleaning up the neighborhood. It ensured that, critically, the victims were completely compliant and that no neighborhood resident would even think to interfere.
And the firepower confirmed this was a professional hit, not some disorganized brawl. They didn't rely on simple handguns.
No. The shooters produced Thompson submachine guns. The nickname Chicago typewriter was practically coined in that moment.
Let's talk about the specifications from the source material. These were not standard police weapons.
And not at all. They fired heavy .45 caliber bullets traveling at 920 feet per second. The Thompson was capable of spewing 1,000 rounds per minute.
1,000 rounds a minute.
This was industrial-grade slaughter, and the shooters ensured overkill, supplementing the machine guns with shotguns.
The sources describe the execution as brutal and lightning fast.
Less than a minute of continuous gunfire.
And can you imagine the sound? The acoustics of that inside a concrete garage? The 7 men just collapsed in a synchronized line as the bullets cut through them.
The impact was systemic. The brick wall behind them was left looking like Swiss cheese, riddled with more than 70 distinct bullet holes.
Wow.
Forensic reconstruction suggested the shooters aimed for maximum devastation, firing multiple bursts into the torsos and heads of the lined-up men. The amount of blood was so significant it flowed into the floor drains that were used for cleaning trucks.
And the exit strategy was just as clean as the entry.
Perfect. The 4 shooters marched out, the uniformed men escorting the 2 civilians, who were of course their Confederates, hands raised, mimicking a successful arrest.
They just slip away in the stolen Cadillac, leaving no immediate suspects, just devastation and a huge question mark. Hashtag d'Omerta and the investigation's dead end.
The crime was discovered around 10:50 a.m., primarily because of the frantic, distressed howling of Highball, a German shepherd belonging to one of the victims.
The dog.
Yeah, the dog. Neighbors called the real police to investigate the noise. When Sergeant Thomas Loftus arrived, the scene was just catastrophic.
6 men were clearly dead. But miraculously, Frank Gusenberg, riddled with 14 bullets, was still alive.
Still alive, slipping in and out of consciousness. Loftus, recognizing that a dying man might break the code of the underworld, pressed him repeatedly for the shooters' names.
And this is where the concept of Omerta, the sacred code of silence, becomes legendary folklore.
It really does. Despite his critical state, facing death just hours later in the hospital, Gusenberg held the line.
His defiant final words were,
"Nobody shot me. I know copper."
incredible. It's an incredible illustration of the absolute power of that mob structure. Even after being betrayed by his own killers, his allegiance to the code transcended his own life.
So the investigation, fueled by public horror, begins immediately. They eventually find the abandoned, burned-out, fake police Cadillac.
And crucially, they find the weapons, 2 Thompson submachine guns which had been quickly discarded.
Right. And this is where forensic science provided the breakthrough the police needed. Ballistics experts analyzed the distinctive striations on the bullets found in the victims.
And they trace one of the specific Thompson guns back to Fred Killer Burke,
A known Capone hitman. And the linkage went even further, providing a timeline of Capone's ruthlessness. The same gun had previously been used in a New York hit to murder Frankie Yale.
So the evidence was irrefutable. This was Capone's weapon.
And the weapon, yes. But proving the connection to Capone himself was the eternal problem, because Capone had constructed an ironclad, meticulously detailed alibi.
1,300 miles away in Miami, Florida.
And this wasn't just some casual trip. Our sources detailed the extreme lengths Capone went to. He made sure he was highly visible, meeting the Miami district attorney, being photographed for the press.
He was creating a paper trail.
His legal and personal team orchestrated his every moment, creating a paper trail and verifiable witness testimony that accounted for every single minute of his day. It was a preemptive defense strategy designed to make prosecution impossible. #ADA. The Pyrrhic victory and societal impact.
So Moran survives, but his gang is completely shattered. His control over the north side just evaporates immediately.
Go on.
And his famous comment to reporters, "Only Capone kills like that." It cemented Capone's image as the most ruthless gangster in American history.
But as our sources argue, this was a Pyrrhic victory. Capone won the turf war. But the shocking savagery of the massacre finally broke public tolerance for gangland violence.
This wasn't just another shooting.
No, this was an execution line designed to look like a police action. That crossed a line. The public outcry led directly to institutional change. Chicago business leaders created the Chicago Crime Commission, specifically dedicated to targeting organized crime.
And the national political pressure intensified.
Hugely. President Herbert Hoover, responding to the national outrage, publicly declared Capone public enemy #1. This was a significant shift in federal priorities.
So Hoover is no longer focused just on bootlegging. He's putting the full weight of the government behind eliminating Capone himself.
Exactly. And since local and state authorities were stymied by the alibi and omerta, the Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, had to adapt. This led to the massive legal influence that changed history.
Unable to prove murder against the untouchable Capone, the federal government pivoted the legal strategy entirely.
And this pivot was revolutionary. Led by Elliot Ness and his team, the federal government intensified focus on financial crimes. They successfully indicted Capone on tax evasion in 1931.
So they got him on taxes.
They got him on taxes. They proved he had vast undeclared income from illegal activities. The massacre didn't convict Capone of murder, but the public revulsion it caused was the political catalyst that led to his destruction via the tax code.
And the ultimate fate of the shooters. It's all steeped in irony and speculation, right?
Yeah.
None were ever charged with the massacre itself.
Not a single one. We know Fred Killer Burke, the owner of the Thompson gun, was later apprehended for killing a police officer in Michigan and died in prison.
And Jack McGurn, the likely mastermind who helped devise the police disguise.
He met a perfectly ironic end. Exactly 7 years later, on Valentine's Day, 1936, he was murdered in a bowling alley.
And his killers left a mocking Valentine on his body.
A perfect, bitter piece of theater, it read. You've lost your job, you've lost your dough, your jewels and cars and handsome houses, but things could be worse, you know. At least you haven't lost your trousers.
A fitting, macabre end that closed the circle of violence precisely where it started.
And finally, we have to mention the bizarre anecdote of the cursed bricks. When the garage was finally demolished in 1967, a Canadian businessman tried to reassemble the infamous bullet-riddled north wall as a morbid museum piece.
But the project failed.
Completely failed. Workers allegedly suffered constant injuries and refused to continue, genuinely believing the bricks were cursed by the bloodshed there.
So the bricks were eventually sold individually as souvenirs, a powerful symbol that even decades later the shadow of the massacre remained. It really stands as the quintessential example of American organized crime and the state's eventual, if indirect, countermeasure. Okay, so now we pivot dramatically. 50 years later, the threat shifts entirely. We move from the Thompson submachine gun and an organized profit motive to the handmade package bomb and isolated pure ideology.
Yeah, we leave the smoke-filled garages of Chicago for the silent, remote forests of Montana.
This is the study of the Unabomber. A campaign of domestic terrorism spanning 17 years that demanded an entirely new kind of forensic and psychological investigation from law enforcement. Hashtag Channel A. The genesis of Unabomber and the escalation.
The campaign started very quietly. May 26, 1978, at Northwestern University. A small, crude device exploded, injuring a security officer, Terry Marker.
And the bomb itself was packed with simple components, right? Like match heads.
Match heads, yeah. Sent in a hand-carved wooden box. And the bomber demonstrated a meticulous commitment to untraceability from day one. Used a fake return address from a real engineering professor. An early attempt at misdirection.
But the materials themselves were the key to the difficulty.
Exactly. The bomber relied heavily on recycled components, using homemade and hand-carved screws, wooden parts. The methodology was deliberate. In 1929, you could trace a Thompson submachine gun serial number. By 1978, the Unabomber ensured there was no supply chain to trace, no standard factory marks, and crucially, zero usable fingerprints.
So the FBI quickly coded the case Unabomber.
Short for University and Airline Bomber, because the early targets clustered around those two sectors.
And the stakes escalated pretty rapidly. A year after that first incident, there was the near catastrophe of American Airlines Flight 444 in 1979.
A sophisticated bomb was planted in the cargo hold. And had the altitude sensor triggering mechanism worked as intended, our sources confirm the blast would have been catastrophic. It would have destroyed the plane and killed everyone on board.
The bomber kept refining his technique, but the pattern was clear. Targets were always associated with modern industrial society, technology, or scientific advancement.
Right, and the attacks were so sporadic, sometimes years would pass between them, which made tracking him just impossible.
The first fatality came in December 1985. Hugh Scruton, the owner of a computer rental store in Sacramento.
He was killed instantly when he tried to remove a disguised device in his parking lot. It was a block of wood with protruding nails, designed to look like junk he needed to clean up.
And this is where we find the bomber's terrifying signature, his unique calling card.
The initials FC, stamped crudely onto metal fragments recovered from the blast site. Investigators were baffled. Was it a clue, a political statement, a signature of defiance?
They just knew it was persistent. It kept appearing in multiple devices, but the meaning was completely elusive.
Then in 1987, the FBI got its first and only confirmed witness sighting in Salt Lake City, the resulting composite sketch.
The famous sketch.
Yeah, the man in a hooded sweatshirt and aviator sunglasses. It was instantly iconic, but utterly useless. It was too generic. It fit almost anyone trying to avoid recognition.
It just underscored the difficulty of identifying a man who was already a ghost. Hashtag B, the demand, the manifesto.
After a 6-year break, the bomber returned in 1993 with a chilling level of precision. He was now targeting specific, named figures in the technological and scientific elite.
He sent devastating bombs to David Gelernter, a leading computer scientist at Yale, and Charles Epstein, a geneticist at UC San Francisco.
Both survived, but with life-altering injuries. Gelernter lost most of the use of his right hand, suffered significant vision loss. Epstein lost several fingers. These were not random acts. They were precise ideological hits.
And the fatalities soon mounted. In December 1994, he murdered Thomas Mosser, an advertising executive, at his New Jersey home.
And our sources point out the deliberate targeting here. Advertising executives, in the bomber's worldview, were the psychological manipulators of the industrial system.
Then came the final murder in April 1995. Gilbert Murray, president of the California Forestry Association, killed instantly when he opened a package at his Sacramento office.
So over 17 years, the campaign had claimed 3 lives and injured 23 others.
And the investigation had just swollen to 150 agents. It became one of the costliest and most frustrating cases in FBI history. They had forensics, but no person.
Right, and that's when the bomber decided to stop targeting individuals and start targeting the public mind.
In June 1995, he sent a clear ultimatum to the New York Times and the Washington Post.
The ultimatum was, publish my 35,000-word essay, Industrial Society and Its Future, or I will escalate the bombing campaign, possibly targeting major airline hubs.
This manifesto is the ideological heart of the entire case. It was a calm, reasoned, and highly analytical text arguing that the Industrial Revolution was an existential catastrophe for the human race.
He argued the system required human beings to surrender their autonomy, leading to deep, debilitating psychological suffering. He identified several concepts critical to his philosophy, which, we really must unpack for clarity.
Let's start with the power process. This is Kaczynski's argument for why modern life is so soul-crushing.
Right. He argued that humans need four things: a goal, effort, attainment, and autonomy. Industrial society provides us with surrogate goals like getting a better job, buying a bigger car, but they require minimal real effort and remove all genuine autonomy.
Leaving us perpetually unfulfilled and psychologically dependent.
Exactly. Then there's over-socialization. Kaczynski claimed the system, via culture, education, media, forces individuals to suppress their natural wild impulses. This constant suppression leads to low self-esteem, neuroses, and eventually the leftism he derided.
Which he saw as mere surrogate activities compensating for the lack of real power and control in their own lives.
Right.
So the FBI faced this profound ethical tightrope. They were terrified of legitimizing terrorism by meeting the bombers' demands.
But the risk of another death, especially an airline disaster, was just too high. The eventual decision, approved by Attorney General Janet Reno and FBI Director Louis Freeh, was to publish the manifesto in full on September 19, 1995.
And the public finally had the terrorists' own words. The chilling, detailed reasoning behind 17 years of calculated violence.
The moment the manifesto hit the newsstands, the game changed completely.
David Kaczynski's wife, Lena Patrick, was the first to read it and experience that flash of recognition. The specific terminology, the complex arguments, the unique turns of phrase.
She recognized her brother-in-law, Ted. She showed the text to David, who was physically sickened as he connected the political philosophy in the manifesto to his older brother's often volatile and highly critical letters.
Letters written from his remote Montana cabin over the years. This led to David's excruciating moral dilemma.
He agonized for months.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a hunch. This was potentially turning in his own family member to face the death penalty.
So he hired a private investigator to discreetly check facts before finally taking his fears and those old letters to the FBI.
And this is where the investigation achieved a genuine, unprecedented forensic breakthrough. Linguistic analysis.
Not ballistics, not fingerprints. Language.
Language. The FBI's specialized language experts meticulously compared the anonymous manifesto to the authenticated letters provided by David.
The detail here is stunning. They didn't just find general thematic overlap.
No, they found more than 200 distinct similarities in specific vocabulary, syntax, rhetorical style, and unusual thought constructions.
For example, the sources mention his unique use of archaic phrasing, specific punctuation quirks, and his particular method of introducing arguments. It was a linguistic fingerprint.
It was. And the resulting identity was one of the most contradictory profiles in criminal history. Theodore John Kaczynski, a mathematical prodigy who entered Harvard at 16, earned a PhD in complex geometry, and became the youngest professor ever hired by UC Berkeley at 25. He was intellectually unparalleled.
Yet he abandoned that world entirely in 1969, retreating to a tiny 10-foot by 12-foot plywood shack in Lincoln, Montana.
No power, no plumbing. Living a strictly primitive lifestyle, subsisting on gardening and hunting, he was actively living the radical, anti-technological life he later commanded others to adopt.
And we have to mention the psychological speculation that fueled so much of the public's fascination. Our sources highlight Kaczynski's time at Harvard.
The Murray experiment.
Where he participated in a brutal psychological experiment run by Professor Henry Murray. These experiments involved participants writing essays detailing their personal philosophies, which were then subjected to prolonged, vicious verbal attacks designed to break down the subject's core beliefs.
While Kaczynski later dismissed the experiment as having no impact, it happened at a highly formative time. And being subjected to extreme, sustained psychological torment for his beliefs, well, it may have certainly cemented his worldview that the powerful system uses psychological warfare to coerce individuals into compliance. #D, the arrest and legal showdown.
So the FBI moved decisively on April 3, 1996, armed with the linguistic proof and the detailed profile.
Agents surrounded the Lincoln cabin. Kaczynski was arrested without resistance, reportedly looking disheveled, but strangely calm.
And the evidence found inside that tiny cabin was, it was just overwhelming.
It was everything. Agents discovered the entire infrastructure of the Unabomber campaign. Detailed journals written in code, meticulously documenting every bombing, every target, and every success or failure over 17 years.
And the most chilling discovery.
A live bomb. Fully assembled and ready to mail, complete with an address label already affixed. He was preparing to continue his war when he was arrested.
The journals offered this deeply unsettling glimpse into the mind of a political terrorist. They were rife with internal conflict.
One moment, he sounds rational, claiming, "I don't get satisfaction out of harm to people," but the temptation to do it was just too great to resist.
But those entries are contradicted by others that showed clear self-congratulatory satisfaction.
Oh, yeah. He meticulously kept newspaper clippings about his victims, rating his own work and planning technical improvements for future devices. This reveals a mind that fully rationalized extreme violence as necessary political action and even enjoyed the results.
So the ensuing legal showdown became a political battle in the courtroom. Kaczynski vehemently insisted on representing himself.
His goal was not acquittal. His goal was to use the federal trial as the ultimate political platform, a national stage, to broadcast his anti-technology ideology directly to the jury and the media.
But his court-appointed defense team wanted to save his life by arguing he was mentally ill specifically, a paranoid schizophrenic.
And Kaczynski viewed this as the ultimate betrayal. He felt that if his political motivations were dismissed as the ramblings of a madman, his entire life's work and philosophical manifesto would be invalidated.
The conflict was dramatic and led to a complete breakdown. Kaczynski attempted suicide in jail and ultimately faced the possibility of being forced into an insanity defense against his will.
So to avoid being legally labeled insane and to maintain control of the narrative, Kaczynski reluctantly accepted a plea deal. Life in prison without parole, sparing him the death penalty.
It was a trade-off, his freedom for his political legitimacy.
Absolutely. And David Kaczynski, the brother who initiated the arrest, publicly expressed his anguish, emphasizing that his decision was driven purely by the hope that his brother's identity would prevent further loss of life. And he offered heartfelt condolences to the victims his brother had claimed. #TagJackE, the uncomfortable and enduring legacy.
The Unabomber investigation cost over $50 million, and it forced the FBI to develop entirely new investigative methods.
Particularly in the realm of forensic linguistics and behavioral analysis for isolated domestic terror.
But the legacy is less about the procedural changes and more about the ongoing philosophical debate. Kaczynski, sent to the Supermax prison, continued corresponding and writing, maintaining his relevance as this strange kind of technological prophet.
And the manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, is still widely read. It's cited across the ideological spectrum, from anarcho-primitivists to environmentalists, and even within the very system he attacked.
And this is where we have to critically grapple with the so what. Our sources highlight the uncomfortable reality that some Silicon Valley executives, the modern-day technological elite, have admitted that the document, when stripped of the violence, raised deeply valid concerns.
Concerns about surveillance, loss of autonomy, and the psychological costs of relentless industrial progress.
It forces us to confront an essential ethical question. Can we, or should we, ethically separate the compelling, reasoned, or even prophetic warnings contained in the manifesto from the murderous terrorism used to deliver them?
Does the validity of the argument survive the brutality of the act? That's the question.
Kaczynski himself certainly never allowed for that separation. He showed zero remorse, stating unequivocally that his actions were justified and necessary to shock the public out of its technological complacency.
In a 1999 interview, he maintained the same conviction. I would do it again.
Theodore Kaczynski died in 2023, but his cabin is preserved as an exhibit, a stark reminder of the hermit who declared war on the future.
He failed to start a revolution, but he successfully forced an uncomfortable conversation that continues today about where technology truly leaves humanity. #TagOutro.
We've examined two crimes that define the dark edges of the American century: the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, an act of corporate consolidation, and the Unabomber campaign, an act of philosophical rebellion.
And when you look at the state's reaction to both, the contrast is stark. Capone waged a war for territory and revenue, and his means of execution relied on impersonating authority, hiding the murder behind the police uniform.
And the state could not charge him with murder.
Couldn't touch him. Kaczynski waged a war for ideology and autonomy, and his violence was aimed at forcing the state to publish his words. His bombs were a megaphone designed to break the silence.
And in both instances, the state won, but not on the terms of the crime itself.
No. Capone's vast empire, built on violence, was ultimately undone by financial scrutiny, a white-collar weapon used against a blue-collar killer.
And Kaczynski's ideological movement was destroyed not by a philosophical refutation or by the legal system labeling him a political threat, but by the emotional decision of his own brother, breaking the family's code of silence.
This cycle of violence and silence is the core takeaway. Gusenberg's commitment to Omerta was a silence enforced by allegiance, and it cost him his life.
And Kaczynski used violence to shatter what he perceived as society's manufactured silence and cognitive blindness to technological harm.
Which leaves us with a truly provocative final thought. We live in the exact, fully industrialized society Kaczynski warned against. Threats defined by money and market dominance are familiar, and the state, having learned from Capone, knows how to dismantle them through financial scrutiny.
But threats defined by unyielding, isolated ideology threats that seek to challenge the fundamental structure of our existence, those threats are far harder to address. Which type of threat, the one focused on financial gain or the one driven by radical philosophical conviction, is more likely to evolve and reappear in our complex digital age?
That is the question you are left to ponder. Do we better understand the price of liquid gold or the price of autonomy?
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.